Obviously, I love this because, we love to demonize the NFL. They blackballed Colin Kaepernick, blah, blah, blah. It happens everywhere. And I think Steven Jackson is actually on to something a little bit with Melo. To me, based off that interview with Stephen A. Smith, Melo has value in this league. And if he's not in this league this year, I do believe the league has turned on him. And I think there's a tinge of credibility to him being blackballed.
I think blackball is harsh. I think if you go even further, talking about collusion is so difficult to prove. Let's talk about what blackball is. It's like you're rejecting something, and usually it's by secret ballot, secret conversation. Like, we're keeping this all as a collective away from you so you won't get your opportunities. I firmly believe Carmelo, by talent, even by production, deserves a chance. He's one of the 450 best basketball players still walking this planet. That said, it's always been more than talent that is a qualifier to being in professional sports. Why isn't Carmelo in the game right now? It's because there's another layer to this conversation that I don't think is a collection of thought. I think individually, every team, every owner is thinking the same thing. What's the difference? My thoughts are Carmelo is a great player, aging superstar, aging star, whatever you want to call him. Difficult to mesh that with a lot of youngsters who I want to groom for their position in their prime, as well as difficult to mesh that with guys who are getting the love but are lesser in terms of what they have accomplished than Carmelo. Where do you fit? You don't necessarily fit with the youngsters in grooming, and you necessarily don't fit with our young stars because they're lesser than you and your best. So I think that's where the difficult fit is. What happens to me looking at it from my vantage point, that owner says it to himself. The next owner is thinking the same thing. It's an easy narrative. Phil Jackson said the most difficult thing to do in the NBA is coach an aging star. I think they're individually thinking this, not in collection and not to the point of blackball.
I think, to your point about Phil Jackson, the most difficult thing about coaching an aging star is when that star is one-dimensional. Carmelo, all he is known as a scorer. That's it. Now, when you get later on in your career, as you start to age, you start to produce. Now, look, talent-wise, he's better than a lot of players.
Oh, yeah.
Like, look at Jared Dudley. And no disrespect to Jared Dudley, but Jared Dudley made a niche for himself probably about 3 or 4 years ago as a catch-and-shoot player and a good locker room guy. Carmelo hasn't put that perception out there for us to see. And now when you look at his talent-wise, yes, he's good. But if you're just one-dimensional, your point production start to erode, and then over time, that pool of teams that were high on you 5, 7 years ago, it dwindles down to about 3 or 4. And now, say there's 3 or 4 teams that's a fit, but you might not be their top priority in those 3 or 4. And so it dwindles down even more. So I think it has a lot more to do with Carmelo not accepting a new, like, he's never going to be a great defender. So that's fine. But I think he needed to show more leadership skills in the locker room probably 3 or 4 years ago that would adapt him to this time where owners and GMs could say, you know what, he may not be skillfully there, but he could be a good locker room presence.
And you guys have both made far better points than I originally did. And I want to piggyback off of what you guys are saying because I think you're exactly right. And so when I say a tinge of being blackballed, I agree with you, Marcel. It's just like people individually have a narrative on him that I think when I say blackball, it's like Daryl Morey is a power guy and part of the good old boy network. And I don't even say that negatively. He's just part of the power structure of the NBA. And the narrative on Carmelo is he's not going to help your young people develop mentally. And do we want to, and the narrative is he'll let a poison loose. What if our young players adopt his mentality the previously? But and again, maybe I'm reading way too much into one interview. I was so thoroughly impressed with the guy during his interview with Stephen A. Smith, his awareness, the depth of his understanding. I think he's in a different place, and I think if these NBA people look at that interview, it's worth engaging with Carmelo and having the discussion about how are you going to help us develop these young players into the right mentality? Because we can figure out a way to get you on the court for 20 minutes a night, leading our second unit. You can be a part of helping us, our offense, operate when our starters sit down. But are you going to be a positive influence on our culture? And I think he's open to that discussion.
You know what? If he's open to it now, they have actual evidence that he wasn't open to it when it was already suggested. That's a difficult place to be. Okay, I get it now. Where they're like, we've been trying to make you understand this before. And then interview emotionally, that context is not the same as being on a team, in the organization, in practice, where you're here as a guy who is a great locker room presence, who can give us help off the bench, whose main job is to get our stars ready. When you're off the bench, everyone talks about the game experience coming off the bench. Midway through the first quarter, I walk in, I'm Carmelo Anthony. I'm telling you, on Wednesday at practice, when they say 5-on-5 and they got shirts, they got skins, and Carmelo, you ain't jerseys, you ain't shirts, you skins. You on the other team, you on the B team, and your goal is to get him right. Your ego comes into play. I borrowed 2 years from the NFL when I knew, at the Clarence Hill, told me in Dallas it was a wrap. Went to Jacksonville, locker room guy. And everything shifted in dynamic. You got to get these other dudes right. If you're not going to be the guy, you got to get the guy who is ready. Are you ready to take that? And then I retired after 2 years of borrowed time because I was like, this is a lot. I'm carrying dudes' helmets, and I'm me. And I'm not even Carmelo. To take that reduction in role, man, that's a hit. And if you can do that, fine. But my phone was still ringing after I left Jacksonville. And I said, nah, because I ain't made for that. If Carmelo's made for that, he has to make it more evident than just an interview. They got to see it.
He came off in an interview well,
yes,
expressing the fact that he's ready to take on that role. The problem is teams want to have already seen that from him at this stage. Now, this is the difficult part. If he gets that next opportunity, and then he shows that he can be that vocal leadership guy, type of guy, he can get 3 more years of service out. It will be easy for the next 3 or 4 years because he's shown it. It's just the fact that you're saying it, okay, that's fine. But it's another thing, like you said, to not have a jersey in practice and actually do it. And they haven't seen that with him.
But Chris, what's the risk at this point? You sign Carmelo, a month in, it's not right. You just discard him. It's not that expensive at this point. He's there. Everybody's out from underneath his mammoth contract. And so I just don't see it as high risk. And I think that a team like, and maybe I'm crazy for thinking this, but the Golden State Warriors, they could bring him in. Look, they brought Boogie in and helped Boogie rehabilitate his image and thought process and teach him a winning culture. I think there may be an opportunity for Carmelo. Again, he can't play defense the way Iguodala did, but I think he can be a better offensive player, and they may need that on their second unit, particularly when Klay Thompson's not available the first half or the first 3/4 of the season. I just think someone should take a chance on Carmelo and cut him loose if it doesn't work.
There's very minimal risk for a team in contention. Now, the problem is these teams only have one spot left. And you see the Lakers, the Clippers, they're trying to fill that spot with Andre Iguodala, championship guy, somebody that they know is going to come in, fit right in. So I agree with you. It's a minimal risk, but you're wasting time. I'm not trying to say his way. He definitely deserves to be in the NBA. But most of these teams don't want to waste time, and they feel like that's just not the ideal primary fit for us.
Yeah, I mean, this is a difficult conversation because, as you know, I love Carmelo, but I'm just talking about how this thing works. And this game works where there are going to be few teams that actually want him by his style of play. You know, ISO's type, mid-range game. X's and O's, you reduced it from 30 to a number. Then you get even fewer teams that have the job security upstairs in terms of decision makers in a league that is risk averse. All leagues are risk averse. That's why you got to look a certain way. You got to be a certain height, jump a certain thing. That's why we got combine. So you could tell an owner who's flying around on private jets when he lands, oh, that's why I picked him. It's pretty obvious. it's not so obvious right now for Carmelo, and that's what's hurting him.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. And be sure to check out more of the best clips from Speak For Yourself, or go watch a few segments from our other shows on FS1.